Hey guys, and welcome back to Electrix Moto. Today we are in our makeshift studio, and what we want to talk about is the things that we would recommend that you do to your E-Ride Pro 2.0 after you've put about 50 to 100 miles on it. Since we are in the makeshift studio today, there are some exterior sounds and things that I cannot control, but I think that this video is important for people who have had their bike for a little bit and they're looking to do some changes, but they've maybe only had it for a month or two. So here is why we say 50 to 100 miles. It's going to take you roughly 50 to 100 miles to figure the bike out, to see how it handles, to understand its power, how it delivers that power through the throttle, how the battery lasts under what riding conditions. All of those things come into play before you should start making any modifications. And I'll probably say something today that a lot of people will disagree with, but I believe that it is true, and that it is when it comes to battery, motor, not so much battery, but definitely motor and definitely controller. When you're trying to make this bike faster, before you even consider that, you should probably ask yourself, do I have the right bike? I think a lot of the power problems that people say they have, or if they want more power, can be handled in the beginning by buying the appropriate bike. So what you have to understand is the 2.0 from E-Ride versus the Sur-Ron Light B, this bike is a much better value bike. It's also less expensive. You have more power right out of the box. And I think that's what everybody wants eventually, is more power. And we would recommend not really touching the controller in the motor. And the reason that we say that is because unless somebody professionally is installing your motor and your controller, you're more than likely going to have problems. All the forums, all the Facebook groups, they all come down, and the people that have problems in those groups all comes down to them making the changes or doing the modifications themselves, not having a professional do it. And that may be something you're experiencing. But this bike out of the box is great. Now, the things that we're going to do, we have 5 things that we're going to do to this bike first, just to make it better without changing any controllers, any motors, and really trying to keep this as inexpensive as possible. So the first thing that we're going to do is the most expensive part of this project, and that will be the front forks and the shock. We are going to upgrade to an Arfloxa front fork and a rear shock. And the reason for that is I believe that the forks and the shock are a little bit flimsy for my liking, a little bit too flimsy. So that's something, depending upon your rider weight, you may never experience. If you're a full-grown man like myself, I'm 175 pounds, probably 180, 185 with all of my gear in a book bag, depending on what I'm doing. These shocks are going to get worn pretty quickly. The seals on the shocks aren't that great, and they will start to leak over time. We are nowhere near needing new shocks, and you are probably not going to need shocks depending upon your riding style for quite some time. But to get this bike in its most appropriate riding form so we can actually test it the way we want to test it, we believe changing the shocks is something that needs to happen right away. So that will be the first thing that we do, and that is the most expensive part of that. I will leave the links to all the products in the description if you want to check them out. That's great. There will also be a discount code down there for you guys to save some money if you do want to do upgrades to your 2.0. But the Arfloxa front forks and suspension shock is going to be the first thing that we do, and we are going to do that today before we start doing any additional testing. Now, the next thing is really inexpensive, and I always say this in a lot of videos, it's the foot pegs. The foot pegs that come on these bikes, particularly the lower end, less expensive bikes, the foot pegs, if you're a street rider, probably okay if you're just wearing tennis shoes all the time. But if you want to be, if you ride this bike in any aggressive manner, I would definitely put different pegs on them. You can find them for very cheap. We have some on our website from Warp 9. We have some from KKE. Yes, you can find some on Alibaba and Amazon, like wherever you find the type of peg that you want. Just get new pegs because you don't want to take, even though these things are not very sharp, I have personally taken one to the shin and it ripped me up pretty bad and I was bleeding for quite a while. So it's something that you can avoid. So those would be like the first 2 things that we're going to touch. Now, number 3 for us is going to be the tires. We are not going to touch the wheels. And the reason we're not going to touch the wheels is it's my belief that with a proper tire, this bike can manage a lot of different style of terrain a lot better. Obviously, all the tires that come on these smaller size E-motos, whether that's Sur-Ron, Talaria, E-Ride Pro, oh, what's the other one? Throne, Serpent. They all are the same, essentially. They're generally a CST tire. It's not that they're a bad tire. It's just from an aggressive standpoint. They don't have a whole lot of tread. They are great to put the first 100 or 50 to 100 miles on, because I think you don't need to touch this bike right when you get it. Just go ride it, enjoy it, and see what you think you may need in the future. But from there, we are going to move to a couple of other things that may not be suitable for everybody, but for us, it's something that we want to do. So the two last things are not for everybody by any means, but we know how we like to ride and we know what we need when we ride. So it's something that you can kind of work into as you feel comfortable. The first thing is the brakes. We are going to switch these out and go to Formula brakes. The reason why is the 2.0 brakes that come on this. It's not that they're bad. It's just that they are more of a mountain bike style brake. They're a lower end brake. So if you are wanting to ride aggressively, then your brakes are going to go pretty quickly, honestly. And depending upon your rider weight, again, that's going to dictate how much how fast these brake pads go, and you will have to replace them. But for us, the levers are nice, but if we have the opportunity to change them to Formula, we're going to do it. I would highly recommend you check out Formula brakes. And when you buy them, buy the front and the rear. A lot of people just purchase the rear, then they come back and purchase the front later. They are brakes that are hard to get, so it's something to consider. If you have an opportunity to pick yourself up a set, I would do it, because it's probably likely that they're going to be out of stock on everybody's website, including ours, within the first 72 hours that they become available in stock. So that would be the fourth thing that we're going to do. Now, the fifth thing is another rider preference. For us, this seat cover does not cut it. We like to ride in an aggressive manner, and in order to do that successfully and comfortably, a good seat cover is absolutely necessary. So we have a gut seat cover that we are going to put on this bike that is going to change. It is absolutely incredible how much a seat cover can change your experience on a bike. I know that may sound silly, but unless you've ridden with one and you've ridden without one, you will probably not understand what I'm trying to say. So definitely pick up a seat cover from whoever, if us or someone else, it doesn't really matter. I don't care, but you will be incredibly surprised at how big of a difference that seat cover makes while riding your bike. So that's the first 5 things that we're going to do on our eRide Pro 2.0. After 50 miles, 100 miles, I think it's actually about 88 miles that we put on this bike. It is time for us to do a little bit of testing on some other products to see how much performance we can get out of this bike. Hopefully it'll be helpful for you, so you don't have to spend the money if it's not something that you're trying to do. But overall, it'll give you a good impression and a good idea of what this bike is capable of with just a few modifications. And honestly, depending upon the suspension that you buy, you could do all of these things for probably less than $700 or $800, and you could have a completely transformed bike. Now, granted, there are things that we're going to do beyond this, but we think these are the most important things that we could see that this bike needs in order to be the type of bike we want it to be and the style of riding that we do. So if you guys have any questions or concerns or information that you need, you could either leave it in the comments, you could shoot us an email. We'll be happy to answer your questions, and we will see you guys on the next one.